and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers. The first married and died childless. Then the second and the third married her. And so, in the same way, all 7 died childless. Finally, the woman also died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife will the woman be? For the 7 had married her. Jesus said to them, "Those who belong to this age marry and are given in marriage. But those who are considered worthy of a place in that age and in the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. Indeed, they cannot die anymore because they are like angels and are children of God, being children of the resurrection. And the fact that the dead are raised, Moses himself showed in the story about the bush, where he speaks of the Lord as the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now he is God not of the dead, but of the living, for to him all of them are alive."
Tradition. Makes me think of Fiddler on the Roof, which is about tradition and the stubbornness to change. Tayev has 5 daughters, and in the musical wants to find them husbands. The traditional way. He does not want change, but as we see in the story, he ends up having no choice. Now I've got that song in my head. Tradition. Okay, never mind. So Webster's dictionary defines the word tradition as the transmission of knowledge, opinions, customs, doctrines, and practices from generation to generation, originally by word of mouth and personal example. We all have inherited traditions from those who have come before us, which we will in turn pass to future generations. And traditions are important. Even now, we're looking forward to Thanksgiving and Christmas, which are all filled with different kinds of traditions. Visits from relatives, someone we only see once a year, a turkey dinner with all the trimmings, Christmas decorations, with a specific time for putting them up and taking them down. Sending Christmas cards, exchanging gifts, and a specific place for putting that Christmas tree. Oh, we've always put the tree in that corner. Translation would mean, you put it somewhere else over my dead, lifeless body. Traditions, right? Well, the church has its own traditions. And we love and honor those traditions. They are part of who we are, and they help us maintain some sense of balance in our lives. Tradition is a good thing. But even good things sometimes need change, tweaking. When honoring tradition is taken to the extreme, it then becomes traditionalism. And like most other isms, traditionalism can be harmful. Definition of traditionalism in a church setting is a system of faith founded on tradition, adherence to tradition. Sometimes because of traditionalism, we do what we do without really knowing why we do it. Other than that's just the way we've always done it. Right? Here at the UCC Church, we don't have creeds. There's nothing in the Bible about creeds. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in the creeds, We just don't have to say the creeds to believe, right? Yeah. But it is tradition, and it kind of blocks you in. Takes away expansion. Oh, here's a story that I found. A husband watched curiously as his wife prepared to place the ham in the oven. Before putting it in to cook, she took a knife and carefully trimmed off both ends of the ham. The husband asked, "Why did you do that?" "I'm not an expert at cooking hams, but I don't even think I've ever seen anyone cut off both ends of the ham before cooking it." The wife answered, "I really don't know. But that's the way my mother always did it." So her curiosity was aroused, and she telephoned her mother to ask why she had always cut off those ends of the ham. "Now that you mention it, I don't know either," said the mother. "That's just the way your grandma always did it. Other than that, honestly, I don't have a clue." Determined now to unravel this mystery, the wife then telephoned her grandmother and asked her why she always cut both ends of the ham off before cooking it. "Well," she said, "the first oven we owned wasn't big enough to put the whole ham in, so I had to cut off both ends of the ham. After that, it just became habit." Tradition. Tradition becomes traditionalism. When we do whatever we do without really knowing why we do it. But continue to do it anyway because that's the way it's always done. Excuse me. Not finished. Today we see some of the people who were most vocal in their opposition to Jesus were people who were rigidly bound to tradition, determined to ensure that things were done the way things had always been done. Jesus, however, is about change. He had run the money changers out of the temple and even set off a series of confrontations between Jesus and the religious leaders. Time and again, they would attempt to trap Jesus into making a mistake, one that would allow them to do away with this troublemaking Galilean once and for all. In the chapter preceding this one, they asked Jesus two tricky questions. The first concerned the source of Jesus' authority, and the second was about paying that tribute to Caesar. In answering the questions with questions of his own, Jesus had made all these religious leaders look pretty foolish. So seriously, are you going to put something over God? Think about that. Today's reading from the Gospel of Luke finds the enemies of Jesus still trying to trap him, posing yet another tricky question. This time the subject is of resurrection of the dead, and the fact that the leadership of the religious community was sharply divided amongst themselves over this issue. There were two ruling groups in the religious hierarchy of the synagogue. There was the priestly class, the Sadducees. Many of them were wealthy, and they considered themselves the nobility of the church. They were the old line, the hard-shell believers, the ones who adhered strictly to ancient tradition and creed. They didn't believe in resurrection because they could find no teaching concerning resurrection in their Bible, which was the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. And if you couldn't find it in there, then God didn't say it, period. The other ruling class was the Pharisees. They believed that there was a written tradition about the resurrection of the dead, that was handed down from Moses, as well as an oral tradition. The Pharisees said that anyone who denied the resurrection of the dead didn't love God. Or in other words, the Pharisees were just as inflexible as the Sadducees. Their question concerning a woman's marital status in the next life, which they didn't believe in anyway, specifically, they wanted to know if a woman had been married 7 times to 7 brothers, each of whom had preceded her in death, whose wife would she be in the resurrection life? Now, as silly as it may seem, there are actual laws governing situations such as this. According to the law of Moses, it was the duty of the dead man's oldest brother to provide for the widow, which meant he had to marry her. If the resurrection life is simply an extension of this life, imagine this poor woman finding out that seven former husbands waiting for her on the other side of those pearly gates. She just may want to turn around and go back at that point. The Sadducees were so bound to their tradition that nothing Jesus said could really make any difference to them or change them in any way. Bound to traditionalism. Jesus explained to them that the conditions in the next life just cannot be compared with the life here and now. It says it's like apples and oranges. He's saying, if you knew your scripture as well as you think you do, you would know that God's power to provide is greater than our greatest longing. If resurrection is a gift from God, who else has the power to grant new life? Then the resurrection life cannot possibly be a continuation of this imperfect life that we live now. God is not God of the dead, but of the living. Marriage is appropriate in this life, but do you really think that to cement our relationships in the next life? Tradition is fine as far as it goes, but he's kind of saying you're taking it too far. But tradition is important. Christ Church has its traditions, but it's called to be the agent of change in the world. The purpose of the church, then, is to change the world by changing people in the world, one at a time, not to preserve the status quo, to keep things the way they've always been, as the religious leaders of Jesus' day tried to do. Jesus' church is to be God's tool in bringing about change in the world, today's world. If we blindly dedicate ourselves to the preservation of all things traditional, how can we ever hope to bring about change? How can we ever hope to bring about change? Now, I don't begrudge anyone fond memories of the way it used to be. I have actually those fond memories myself. But please, let's not confine God to sentimental memories the way we were. Let's not lock Jesus up in memories of the church as it used to be. The point is that the past is the past. It's gone. We can learn from it, but we need to go forward. Things will never be like that again. The world is constantly changing. And we have seen a lot of changes in this world in the last few years. And Jesus cannot be entombed in the past, for the grave cannot hold him. So we are called to acknowledge God's ownership of all things, including especially the church. We are called to seek God in events of every day, not in our yesterdays, but in our todays. We never did it that way before. Could be very well the last words of the church. Think on that. Because although God does accept us just as we are, God expects us to become new creations in Jesus Christ. And new creations do not accept old limitations. Now today, as I mentioned to the kids, this is the only time you'll see me do this. I was also assistant rector in an Episcopal church. Trust me, if I put on all the garb with everything else, I'd be sweating right now. I'm not putting all that on. But I'm going to do some of the things that the Roman Catholic and the Episcopal Church and the Lutheran churches do today. Show you what tradition was like. It doesn't mean that the way we do it or the way they do it is better. It's what's better for us here today.